The first rays of the African sun stretched across the dense jungle like golden fingers reaching out to embrace the earth. The air carried a crisp coolness that would soon surrender to the blazing heat of midday. Birds announced the arrival of morning with their symphonic chorus, breaking the sacred silence that had blanketed the wilderness through the night. Somewhere in the distance, a baboon barked its warning call, and the rustling of leaves spoke of creatures beginning their daily routines. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat in the lead vehicle of his convoy, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel with the confidence of a man who had traveled these treacherous roads countless times before. His military uniform bore the dust of many campaigns, and his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, held stories of battles fought, comrades lost, and missions accomplished against impossible odds. Yet today, there was something different in his demeanor. A quiet contemplation, perhaps. A readiness for whatever Providence might place in his path. The convoy consisted of 5 military jeeps, each carrying seasoned soldiers on a classified reconnaissance mission deep into the heart of the African wilderness. The red clay road beneath them was rutted and unforgiving, causing the vehicles to lurch and sway with each passing meter. To their left, the jungle rose like an impenetrable wall of green, alive with mysteries both beautiful and dangerous. To their right, the land opened into sparse grasslands where acacia trees stood like silent sentinels watching over the plains. Ibrahim's second-in-command, Lieutenant Kofi Mensah, sat beside him, occasionally glancing at a worn map spread across his lap. The younger officer had served under Ibrahim for 3 years now and had learned to read his commander's moods like weather patterns. Today he sensed something contemplative in Ibrahim's silence, a spiritual awareness that seemed almost prophetic. "Sir," Kofi ventured, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "The village elders said something strange before we left. They said this road has been blessed by the spirits of the ancestors, that those who travel it with pure hearts will be protected." Ibrahim smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. "Every road is blessed, Kofi. Every moment is sacred if we choose to see it that way. The question is not whether protection exists, but whether we are worthy of receiving it." The convoy continued its steady progress, the engines humming their mechanical prayers as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. None of them knew that within the hour their mission would be interrupted by an encounter that would change the course of Ibrahim's life and challenge everything they understood about courage, compassion, and the mysterious workings of divine providence. It began as a sound so unusual that at first, Ibrahim thought his ears were deceiving him. A cry, primal and desperate, echoed through the morning air, cutting through the engine noise like a knife through silk. It was neither fully animal nor entirely comprehensible, a sound that spoke of anguish and desperation in a language older than words. Ibrahim's hand shot up in the universal signal for halt. The convoy came to an immediate stop, engines idling as soldiers looked around with heightened alertness. Years of combat training had taught them to trust their instincts, and every man present felt the weight of something significant happening. "Did you hear that?" whispered Private Adeo from the back seat, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle. The cry came again, louder this time, more insistent. It carried the weight of maternal anguish, the kind of sound that transcends species and speaks directly to the heart. Several soldiers gripped their weapons tighter, scanning the thick bush for signs of threat. In this part of Africa, danger could wear many faces: rebel militias, poachers, or the wild predators that ruled the food chain. Ibrahim raised his binoculars and scanned the landscape methodically, section by section. The morning sun created a tapestry of light and shadow across the terrain, making it difficult to distinguish shapes. Then, through the dancing heat waves and swaying grass, he saw them. A lioness was frantically digging at the earth, her powerful paws tearing into the ground with desperate fury. Beside her, a male lion paced in tight circles, periodically stopping to roar at the sky as if demanding intervention from higher powers. Between them, partially visible through the tall grass, was what appeared to be a depression in the ground, and from it came the weakening cries of something young and helpless. "Lions," breathed Lieutenant Kofi. who had moved up beside Ibrahim with his own binoculars. "Sir, we should move on. This is none of our concern. Getting involved with wild predators would be what?" Ibrahim interrupted gently, still watching the desperate parents through his lenses. "Look at them, Kofi. Really look. Do you see aggression? Do you see hunting behavior? Or do you see what I see? Two parents whose world is ending because their child is in mortal danger." The question hung in the air like incense smoke. Several soldiers had dismounted and now stood around Ibrahim's vehicle, all watching the drama unfold before them. The lioness roared again, and this time the sound carried no threat, only the universal language of a mother's grief. Ibrahim lowered his binoculars and turned to face his men. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity, fear, and confusion. These were warriors trained for combat, not wildlife rescue. Yet in their commander's eyes they saw something that gave them pause, a determination born not of military duty, but of something far more profound. "Gentlemen," Ibrahim said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of conviction, "we are about to witness either a moment of grace or a moment of regret. The choice is ours. In my years of service, I have learned that the measure of a man, of any creature, really is not found in their strength, but in how they respond when they encounter suffering they did not cause but have the power to address." Private Adeo, the youngest of the group, spoke up hesitantly. "Sir, with respect, these are dangerous animals. Lions kill. It's their nature. Why would they not attack us if we approach?" Ibrahim placed a firm but gentle hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "You're right that they can kill. But right now, they're not hunters. They're parents. And if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that desperation can either make us monsters or reveal our truest nature. Let's find out which one applies here." Without waiting for further discussion, Ibrahim began walking toward the lions, his rifle deliberately left behind in the jeep. The soldiers exchanged glances of disbelief. Lieutenant Kofi moved to follow, but Ibrahim raised his hand. "Stay with the vehicles. If something goes wrong, you'll know what to do. But I don't believe it will. Call it faith, call it foolishness. But I feel in my bones that we were meant to be here at this exact moment." As Ibrahim walked forward, the morning sun seemed to intensify, bathing the scene in an almost ethereal light. Each step brought him closer to the lions, and with each step the roaring subsided slightly. The lioness stopped digging and turned her massive head toward him. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, human and beast locked eyes. In that gaze, Ibrahim saw what he had suspected, not aggression, but a desperate plea. It was a look he had seen before in the eyes of mothers in war-torn villages, in the faces of soldiers calling for medics, in the expression of anyone who had exhausted every option and now threw themselves upon the mercy of whatever help the universe might provide. "I see you," Ibrahim whispered, though he knew the lioness couldn't understand his words. "I see your pain, and I will help." As Ibrahim drew closer, the full extent of the situation became horrifyingly clear. What had appeared from a distance to be merely a depression in the ground was actually a deep pit, likely created by erosion and recent rains that had transformed into a death trap of mud and standing water. The earth around it was treacherous, softened by underground seepage that made the ground unstable and prone to collapse. At the bottom of this pit, nearly submerged in thick dark mud, was a lion cub no more than a few months old. Only its small head occasionally broke the surface, gasping for air before sinking back into the mire. The tiny creature's golden fur was caked with mud, making it appear like a small, struggling ghost. Its cries were growing weaker with each passing moment, the sound of a life slipping away. The mother lioness's paws were bloody from hours of desperate digging. She had torn her claws trying to reach her cub, but the unstable earth had defeated her at every turn. The angle was wrong, the pit too deep, and the mud too thick for her powerful limbs to gain purchase. Her mate paced nearby, his magnificent mane dusty and his eyes wild with helplessness. Every few moments he would approach the pit, assess it with predatory intelligence, and then back away. Growling in frustration, Ibrahim's soldiers had moved closer now, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough to act if needed. They watched in stunned silence as their commander surveyed the situation with the analytical mind of an engineer and the heart of a father. Several of them were fathers themselves and knew too well the look in those leonine eyes. "This is madness, sir," Lieutenant Kofi called out, his voice strained with concern. "The ground could give way. You could fall in with the cub. And even if you succeed, there's no guarantee these animals won't attack once their fear subsides." Ibrahim nodded, acknowledging the truth in his lieutenant's words. Yet he made no move to retreat. Instead, he knelt at the edge of the pit, examining the soil carefully. He picked up a handful and let it run through his fingers, assessing its moisture content and stability. Years of military engineering training had taught him to read terrain like others read books. "The ground is treacherous," he confirmed, speaking as much to himself as to his men, "but not impossible. The key is distributing my weight across a larger surface area." He turned back toward the vehicles. "Bring me the wooden planks from the back of the supply truck. And rope, at least 50 meters of it." As soldiers rushed to comply, Ibrahim continued his assessment. The pit was roughly 3 meters deep and 2 meters wide at its mouth, narrowing as it descended. The cub was trapped in the deepest section, where the mud had the consistency of cement. Time was critical. The small creature was weakening by the minute, its struggles growing more feeble. The male lion watched Ibrahim with intense focus, his tail twitching with nervous energy. In any other circumstance, such proximity to a full-grown male lion would be suicidal. These apex predators could kill with a single swipe of their massive paws. Yet something held the great cat back, some instinctive understanding that this human represented not threat, but hope. When the planks arrived, Ibrahim laid them out carefully, creating a bridge that would distribute his weight across the treacherous ground. He tested each board, ensuring it was positioned correctly. Then, removing his combat boots to gain better sensitivity to weight distribution, he began his slow advance toward the pit's edge. "Sir, please," Private Adeo called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Let me go instead. You have a wife, children. If someone must risk their life, let it be someone with less to lose." Ibrahim paused and looked back at the young soldier with such profound compassion that several men later reported feeling moved to tears by that glance alone. "Adeo," Ibrahim said softly, "I have a wife and children precisely because I am a man who believes some risks must be taken. What kind of father would I be if I taught my children that we only help when it's convenient? What kind of husband if I showed my wife that my principles only matter when they cost me nothing? No, my young friend, this is exactly the kind of moment that defines us. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I'm lighter than you, better chances of not breaking through." With that, Ibrahim turned back to his task. The planks creaked under his weight as he inched forward, his movements slow and deliberate. Each placement of hand or knee was calculated, his breathing controlled. Behind him, his soldiers held their collective breath, while before him, the lion parents watched with an intensity that seemed almost human in its emotional depth. The lioness made a low sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. It was a sound of acknowledgement, of understanding. She backed away slightly, giving Ibrahim space but never taking her eyes off him. The male lion sat on his haunches, his massive chest heaving with tension, but showing no signs of aggression. Ibrahim reached the edge of the pit and looked down. The sight nearly broke his heart. The cub's eyes were open, staring up at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Its tiny mouth opened and closed, each breath labored. The mud had claimed the small creature up to its neck, and it was clear that without intervention, it would sink completely within minutes. "Allah," Ibrahim whispered, "guide my hands. Let me be an instrument of your mercy." He reached down, stretching his arm into the pit. His fingers were still a foot short of reaching the cub. He would have to go lower, shift more of his weight over the unstable edge. The planks groaned ominously beneath him. "Sir, the boards won't hold," Lieutenant Kofi shouted. "Please come back." Ibrahim ignored the plea. He shifted his weight forward, feeling the planks begin to bow beneath him. His hand descended further, closer, almost there. The cub's eyes locked onto his fingers as if they represented salvation itself. Then, with a final stretch that pushed his center of gravity to the breaking point, Ibrahim's fingers found purchase behind the cub's ears. He grasped firmly but gently, knowing that one wrong move could snap the fragile neck or cause the cub to panic and sink deeper. "I have you," he murmured, and pulled. The suction of the mud fought against him, reluctant to release its prey. Ibrahim pulled harder, feeling the strain in his shoulder and back. The planks beneath him cracked audibly, splinters flying. For a terrible moment it seemed he might fail, that both he and the cub would plunge into the deadly pit together. But then, with a sound like a reluctant kiss, the mud released the cub. Ibrahim pulled the small creature free, cradling it against his chest as he carefully reversed his position on the increasingly unstable planks. The cub was heavier than expected, waterlogged with mud and barely responsive. But it was breathing. It was alive. As Ibrahim's feet found solid ground once more, a roar split the air, but this time it was unmistakably a roar of relief. The lioness bounded forward, and every soldier raised his weapon, fearing the worst. But Ibrahim raised his free hand in a gesture of peace and gently, gently placed the muddy cub on the ground before stepping back. What happened next would be recounted by the soldiers for the rest of their lives, told and retold until it became legend, yet never embellished, because the truth itself was more incredible than any fiction could be. The lioness approached her cub with a tenderness that seemed almost impossible in such a powerful predator. She sniffed the small creature thoroughly, then began licking the mud from its face and body with long, careful strokes of her rough tongue. The cub, responding to its mother's touch, began to move more vigorously, its cries transitioning from distress to something more like complaint, the sound of a child who has been frightened but is now safe. The male lion approached as well, his massive head lowering to nuzzle the cub gently. The small family formed a tableau of reunion that transcended species, the universal joy of a parent recovering a lost child. The relief of danger passed, the gratitude for deliverance from death's door. Ibrahim stood approximately 10 meters away, mud-caked and exhausted, watching the scene with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. His soldiers remained at the vehicles, equally mesmerized by what they were witnessing. No one spoke. No one moved. The moment was too sacred for human interference. Then the lioness did something that would haunt Ibrahim's dreams for years to come. She stopped cleaning her cub, raised her head, and looked directly at him. It was not the gaze of a predator assessing prey, nor the wary look of a wild animal confronting a human. It was something else entirely, a look of profound recognition and gratitude that bridged the supposedly unbridgeable gap between species. She held his gaze for perhaps 10 seconds, though it felt like an eternity. In that moment, Ibrahim felt he was being seen, truly seen, by eyes that looked beyond his human form to something deeper, some essential quality of soul that both species shared. Then, slowly and deliberately, the lioness lowered her massive head in what could only be described as a bow. The male lion, as if understanding some signal Ibrahim could not perceive, also lowered his head toward the human. The cub, still weak but recovering, made a small mewing sound that might have been, anthropomorphizing or not, its own form of thanks. "Subhanallah," Ibrahim whispered, using the Arabic phrase meaning "glory be to God." His legs suddenly felt weak, and he sank to his knees, not in fear but in overwhelming emotion. "Thank you," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was thanking the lion's God or the universe itself for allowing him to witness and participate in such a moment. Lieutenant Kofi, watching from the vehicles, later wrote in his journal, "I saw my commander, the bravest man I know, kneel in the dust before 3 lions and weep like a child. But they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of a man who had touched something holy, something that reminded him why we are here, not to conquer or destroy, but to protect and preserve." In that moment, I understood what true strength looks like. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, the lion family began to move away. The lioness picked up the cub gently in her mouth, the same mouth that could crush bone and rend flesh now holding her baby, with infinite tenderness. The male lion walked beside them, his head turning back once to look at Ibrahim with those amber eyes that seemed to hold depths of wisdom. They walked not in the frantic manner of fleeing prey, but with the dignified pace of royalty taking their leave from an honored gathering. At the edge of the grassland, just before the family disappeared into the higher brush, the lioness set down her cub one final time and turned back. She let out a sound, not a roar, but something softer, almost melodic. Then she picked up the cub again and vanished into the wilderness. "What was that sound?" asked Private Adeo, his voice barely above a whisper. Ibrahim rose to his feet slowly, his legs still shaky. He looked at the young soldier with eyes that seemed to have aged a decade in the past hour, yet also looked somehow younger, more alive. "That," Ibrahim said softly, "was the sound of grace, the sound of the universe acknowledging an act of mercy. That was the sound of Allah reminding us that His creation is more interconnected and more conscious than we typically allow ourselves to believe." The soldiers slowly gathered around their commander, forming a loose circle in the dusty ground. The morning sun had climbed higher now, and the day was growing hot, but no one seemed to notice or care. Something profound had just occurred, and each man present felt the weight of it settling into their bones like truth itself. "Gentlemen," Ibrahim said, addressing his men with a voice that carried both authority and humility, "today we came here on a military mission, but we've received a different kind of mission instead, a reminder that the greatest victories are not won with weapons, but with compassion. That lioness could have killed me. That male could have seen me as a threat and torn me apart. But they didn't because they sensed my intention. Animals know things we've forgotten. They can smell fear, yes, but they can also smell mercy. They recognized that I meant to help, and they trusted me." He paused, looking at each man in turn. "When we return to base, we will complete our assigned tasks. We will do our duty as soldiers, but I want each of you to remember this moment. Remember that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is not to fight, but to help. Not to destroy, but to preserve. Not to see an enemy, but to see a soul in need." The soldiers nodded, some wiping at their eyes, others simply standing in thoughtful silence. Private Adeo stepped forward and spoke what many were thinking. "Sir, do you think maybe we were meant to be here? That somehow this wasn't just random chance?" Ibrahim smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Adeo, I stopped believing in random chance a long time ago. Every moment is woven into the tapestry of divine purpose. We may not always see the pattern, but it's there. Yes, I believe we were meant to be here. And I believe what happened here today will echo forward in ways we cannot yet imagine." With that, the convoy prepared to move on. But as Ibrahim climbed back into his vehicle, he paused to pick up a small stone from beside the pit where the cub had been trapped. He placed it carefully in his pocket, knowing somehow that he would carry this memento with him for the rest of his life. A reminder of the day he learned that mercy is the greatest weapon of all. The convoy resumed its journey, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Where before there had been the routine banter of soldiers on a mission, now there was contemplative quiet. Each man seemed lost in his own thoughts, processing what they had witnessed, trying to fit it into their understanding of how the world worked. Ibrahim drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel but his mind far away. He kept seeing the lioness's eyes, kept feeling the fragile weight of that muddy cub in his hands, kept hearing that final melodic sound the mother had made before disappearing into the bush. Something in him had shifted, like tectonic plates deep beneath the earth, finding a new equilibrium. They drove for several more hours, the landscape gradually changing from dense jungle to more open savanna. The red clay road eventually gave way to packed dirt, then to a rough gravel path that led toward their checkpoint. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Lieutenant Kofi finally broke the long silence. "Sir, may I ask you something personal?" Ibrahim glanced at his second-in-command and nodded. "Of course. What were you thinking when you were reaching for that cub? When the boards were breaking and everyone thought you were about to fall in? What was going through your mind?" Ibrahim was quiet for a long moment, carefully considering his answer. Finally, he spoke. I was thinking about my daughter, Amina. She's 7 years old now, you know. Last month, she fell into our well back home. It's not deep, maybe 2 meters, but she couldn't climb out. She was down there for only 10 minutes before I pulled her up, but those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. When I looked down into that pit today and saw that cub, I didn't see an animal. I saw Amina. I saw every child who has ever needed help, every creature that has ever been trapped and afraid. And I thought, if I don't help, then what am I? What's the point of all this strength, all this training, all these weapons, if I can't use them to preserve life when it really matters? Kofi absorbed this in silence, then nodded slowly. I understand, sir. I think we all do now. As they approached the checkpoint where they were scheduled to report in and receive further orders, Ibrahim felt an unusual sense of peace settling over him. Despite the mission's challenges ahead, despite the dangers they all faced daily in this volatile region, he felt centered in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The encounter with the lions had reminded him of something essential about his purpose, not just as a soldier, but as a human being. The checkpoint consisted of several temporary structures and communication equipment manned by a small garrison. As their convoy pulled up, the soldiers stationed there came out to greet them, expecting a routine arrival. But something in Ibrahim's bearing must have conveyed that this had been no routine journey. After the formal check-in procedures, Ibrahim sat in the communications tent while his men rested and prepared for the next phase of their mission. He was writing in his field journal, a habit he'd maintained throughout his military career, when Lieutenant Kofi entered. His face pale and his hands trembling slightly. Sir, we've received an urgent transmission from headquarters. Something in Kofi's tone made Ibrahim set down his pen immediately. What is it? Sir, the base camp where we were stationed. The one we left yesterday morning to begin this mission. Kofi's voice broke slightly. It was attacked approximately 3 hours after our departure. Rebel forces heavily armed. They overran the position completely. Ibrahim felt as if the ground had tilted beneath him. Casualties? Kofi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Sir, everyone who remained behind. Sergeant Diallo, Corporal Mensah, Private Okonkwo, all of them. None survived. The names hit Ibrahim like physical blows. These were men he had trained with, fought beside, shared meals and stories with. Men with families, dreams, futures that had now been brutally cut short. The communications tent suddenly felt suffocating, the air too thick to breathe. How many? Ibrahim asked quietly. 23 confirmed dead, sir. No survivors, no wounded. The attack was thorough. Ibrahim stood and walked out of the tent into the fading daylight. His men, seeing his expression, gathered around silently, sensing terrible news. He told them briefly, factually, each word costing him immeasurably. Several soldiers broke down weeping. Others stood in shocked silence. The celebration of their earlier miracle evaporated, replaced by grief and survivor's guilt. But as Ibrahim stood there, watching the sun sink below the horizon, a realization began to crystallize in his mind with devastating clarity. If their convoy hadn't stopped that morning, if they hadn't spent that hour with the lions, they would have still been at base camp when the attack came. They would have been among the dead. Sir, Private Adeo said quietly, coming to stand beside him. If we hadn't stopped for the cub... I know, Ibrahim said softly. I know. The words hung in the air between them, laden with implications neither wanted to fully articulate. Had saving the lion cub saved their lives? Was it simply coincidence? Or was it, as Ibrahim was increasingly believing, evidence of a divine orchestration that transcended human understanding? That night, Ibrahim lay awake in his tent, staring at the canvas ceiling while his men slept fitfully around him. He pulled out the stone he had taken from beside the pit and held it in his palm, feeling its weight, its solidity, its realness. 23 men were dead, his men. But he and the 14 soldiers with him had been spared. Why? For what purpose? The answer came to him not as words, but as a feeling, a profound certainty that settled into his bones. The lions had not just been rescued by him. They had rescued him. Not physically pulling him from danger, but positioning him in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. His act of mercy had been met with mercy. His compassion had been repaid with preservation. Allah, he whispered into the darkness. I understand. You were not just showing me how to save a life. You were showing me that mercy itself is survival. That compassion is the highest form of intelligence. That in a world of violence and death, the greatest victory is choosing to preserve life whenever possible. As if in response, a sound drifted through the night, distant but unmistakable. A lion's roar, not of aggression but of simple existence, announcing its presence to the world. Ibrahim smiled through his tears and fell, finally, into a deep and dreamless sleep. Dawn came cold and clear. Ibrahim woke before his men and performed his morning prayers with unusual intensity, prostrating himself on the bare earth and asking for guidance. The weight of command had never felt heavier. He had lost 23 brothers, yet he still had 14 living soldiers depending on his leadership. The mission still needed completion. The war, if that's what this endless conflict could be called, continued regardless of personal grief. After prayers, as his men began to stir and the camp came to life, Ibrahim made a decision that surprised even himself. Lieutenant Kofi, he called, I need you to take command of the convoy and complete the reconnaissance mission. Take everyone except Private Adeo. He'll accompany me. Kofi looked startled. Sir, where are you going? Ibrahim met his lieutenant's gaze steadily. I need to go back to where we found the lions. I need to confirm something. Sir, that's not part of our mission parameters. And with respect, after yesterday's attack, we should stay together. Safety in numbers. I understand your concern, Lieutenant, and under normal circumstances, I would agree. But these are not normal circumstances. What happened yesterday with the lions, with the attack, it's all connected somehow. I feel it in my bones. I need to see that place again. I need to understand the message I'm being sent. The two men stood facing each other, and Kofi saw something in his commander's eyes that gave him pause. It wasn't recklessness or irrationality. It was clarity, the kind of certainty that comes from deep internal conviction. How long do we wait for you if you don't return by nightfall? Kofi asked quietly. If I'm not back by tomorrow noon, assume the worst and complete the mission without me. But I will be back, Kofi. I promise you that. 30 minutes later, Ibrahim and Private Adeo set out in a single jeep, retracing the route from the previous day. The young soldier drove while Ibrahim sat in silence watching the landscape pass. The morning was beautiful, the air crisp, the light golden, the world seemingly at peace. Yet Ibrahim knew that beneath this veneer of tranquility, violence and death lurked constantly in this part of the world. Sir, Adeo ventured after they'd been driving for nearly an hour, can I ask what you're hoping to find? Ibrahim considered the question. Honestly, Adeo, I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe confirmation of something I already believe but need to see with my own eyes. Have you ever felt like the universe was trying to tell you something, but you couldn't quite hear the message clearly? Adeo nodded slowly. My grandmother used to say that God speaks in whispers and wonders, not in shouts. She said we miss most of his messages because we're too busy making noise ourselves. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Ibrahim said with a slight smile. I think yesterday he whispered through the cries of a lion cub. Today I'm trying to hear what comes next. As they approached the area where the rescue had occurred, Ibrahim felt his pulse quicken. Something in him knew with inexplicable certainty, that this journey was not in vain. The pit was visible from a distance, the disturbed earth still marking the spot where Ibrahim had laid his planks and risked his life. But what made Ibrahim's breath catch? In his throat was what waited beside the pit. 3 leonine forms sat motionless in the morning light. The lioness, the male, and between them, playing with a stick, the cub they had saved. All 3 were positioned as if they had been waiting, as if they had known Ibrahim would return. Sir, Adeo whispered, his voice filled with awe. They came back too. Ibrahim brought the jeep to a gentle stop about 50 meters from the lions. He stepped out slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. The lions did not flee. The male's ears twitched forward with attention. The lioness raised her massive head, and the cub stopped its play to stare at the approaching human. Stay with the vehicle, Ibrahim instructed Adeo. If anything goes wrong, don't be a hero. Just go. Sir, that's an order, Private. Ibrahim walked forward alone, his heart pounding but his steps steady. As he drew closer, he could see that the cub was completely recovered, its golden coat clean and fluffy, its movements full of youthful energy. It was hard to believe this vibrant creature had been the muddy, half-drowned thing he'd pulled from the pit just yesterday. When Ibrahim was about 10 meters away, he stopped and slowly lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the ground. It was a posture of non-aggression, of respect, of openness. The lioness watched him intently. Then, incredibly, she began to move toward him. Adeo, watching from the jeep, later said his heart nearly stopped as the massive lioness closed the distance between herself and his commander. Every muscle in her body was visible beneath her tawny coat, every movement a display of barely contained power. She could have killed Ibrahim with contemptuous ease, but she didn't. Instead, when she reached him, she sat down approximately 2 meters away, close enough that Ibrahim could have reached out and touched her, far enough to respect a boundary neither fully understood but both acknowledged. The male lion rose and walked over as well, though he maintained a slightly greater distance, standing guard as males do. The cub, with the fearlessness of youth, bounded over and sat directly in front of Ibrahim, tilting its small head and studying the human with open curiosity. The tiny creature reached out one paw and batted experimentally at Ibrahim's boot, then looked up at its mother as if seeking permission. The lioness made a low sound, a grunt or chuff, and the cub settled down, content to simply be near this strange two-legged creature who smelled of metal and sweat and something else the cub couldn't identify. Compassion. For perhaps 20 minutes, the four of them sat together in the warming morning. No words, no violence, no fear, just shared space and mutual recognition. Ibrahim felt tears streaming down his face but made no move to wipe them away. He was witnessing something profound, something that confirmed what his heart had been trying to tell him. "I understand now," he said aloud, knowing the lions couldn't comprehend his words but needing to speak them anyway. "You didn't just let me save your cub. You saved me, not just my life but something deeper. You reminded me that mercy transcends everything, species, language, circumstance. You showed me that in a world filled with violence and death, the greatest rebellion is choosing to preserve life. The greatest victory is compassion." The lioness, as if understanding, held his gaze. In her amber eyes, Ibrahim saw intelligence, awareness, and something that looked remarkably like gratitude. She blinked slowly, a gesture of trust in the feline world, and then rose gracefully to her feet. The male lion stood as well, and the cub, sensing the moment of departure, scrambled up and pressed against its mother's leg. The lioness looked at Ibrahim one final time, and in that moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a blessing, a promise that transcended the boundaries of species and spoke to something universal and eternal. Then, without haste or fear, the lion family turned and walked away into the grasslands. The cub looked back twice, its tail swishing playfully, before following its parents into the tall grass. Within moments, they had vanished as completely as if they had never been there at all. Ibrahim remained seated for several more minutes, letting the experience settle into his bones. When he finally stood and returned to the jeep, he found Adeo wiping tears from his own face. "Sir, I can't." The young soldier struggled for words. "I know," Ibrahim said gently. "Some experiences can't be captured in language. They can only be lived and remembered." The journey back to the checkpoint took less time than the journey out, though Ibrahim drove slowly, reluctant to leave behind the sacred space where he had encountered the lions for the second time. Private Adeo sat in contemplative silence beside him, occasionally glancing at his commander as if seeing him for the first time. "Sir," Adeo finally said as they neared the checkpoint, "what happened back there? That lioness could have attacked. The male definitely could have. But they didn't. They just sat with you. Like you were one of them. How is that possible?" Ibrahim considered the question carefully. "Adeo, I think animals understand intention in ways we've forgotten. They can sense the energy we bring to an encounter. That lioness knew, not intellectually but instinctively, that I meant no harm. More than that, she remembered that I had helped her. Animals have longer memories than we give them credit for, especially when it comes to kindness or cruelty. Do you think they came back specifically to wait for you? That seems impossible. Does it? Ibrahim smiled faintly. Yesterday morning, if someone had told me I would save a lion cub and that act would spare me from a deadly attack, I would have called that impossible too. Yet here I am, alive when 23 of my brothers are not. I've stopped questioning what's possible and started accepting what is. When they arrived at the checkpoint, they found the rest of the convoy preparing to depart. Lieutenant Kofi approached the jeep immediately, relief evident on his face. Sir, thank God, we were beginning to worry. No need for worry, Lieutenant. I'm exactly where I need to be. Ibrahim stepped out of the jeep and gathered his men around him. Their faces showed the strain of recent grief, but also curiosity about where their commander had gone. Gentlemen, Ibrahim began, I know you're wondering about my unauthorized detour this morning. I went back to the place where we encountered the lions yesterday, and what I found there has confirmed something I need to share with you all. He paused, looking at each face in turn. We lost 23 brothers yesterday because we chose to stop and help a trapped animal. Some might say that was foolish, that we should have stayed on schedule, that our mission should have taken priority. But I tell you now with absolute certainty, if we had not stopped, we would have been at base camp when the attack came. We would be among the dead. A murmur ran through the gathered soldiers. Some nodded slowly, clearly having reached the same conclusion. Others looked skeptical, unwilling to attribute their survival to anything more than coincidence. I'm not asking you to believe in miracles, Ibrahim continued. I'm simply asking you to consider that there are forces in this universe larger than our military strategies and weapons. Yesterday I was prepared to die helping that cub. I wasn't thinking about survival or reward. I was simply doing what felt right, what felt human. And in return, the universe, God, Allah, whatever name you use for the divine, positioned us in exactly the right place to survive. He pulled the stone from his pocket and held it up so all could see. I took this from beside the pit where the cub was trapped. I'm keeping it as a reminder of something important, that mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not foolishness. In fact, they may be the most powerful forces available to us. Stronger than any weapon, more protective than any armor. Private Adeo stepped forward. Sir, I was with the commander this morning. The lions were waiting for us. The same lions. They came and sat with him like they were thanking him again. I saw it with my own eyes. This revelation caused an even greater stir among the soldiers. Several exchanged glances of amazement, while others looked openly moved by the news. I don't claim to understand all the mysteries of this world, Ibrahim said. But I do know this. We were saved because we chose mercy over indifference. We were preserved because we valued life, any life, even that of an animal, over the convenience of staying on schedule. And that lesson, brothers, is more valuable than any military intelligence we might gather on this mission. Lieutenant Kofi, who had been listening intently, spoke up. Sir, what you're describing? It's beautiful, inspiring even, but we're still soldiers. We still have enemies who want to kill us. How do we reconcile this message of mercy with the reality of war? It was a fair question, and Ibrahim respected Kofi for asking it. An excellent question, Lieutenant. And here's my answer. Mercy and strength are not opposites. We can be fierce in defense of the innocent while still recognizing the humanity, the soul, in everyone and everything. We fight when we must, but we don't let that fighting turn us into monsters. We protect life whenever possible, and when we must take life, we do so with regret rather than pleasure, with necessity rather than hatred. He gestured toward the horizon, where the savannah stretched endlessly. Out there, lions kill to survive, but they also protect their young, care for their pride, and, as we witnessed, recognize kindness when it's offered. They're fierce and gentle, dangerous and loving. They hold both truths simultaneously. Why should we be any different? The soldiers absorbed this, and Ibrahim could see his words taking root. These were good men, he knew. They had joined the military to protect their communities, not because they loved violence. His message resonated with something they already believed but perhaps hadn't articulated. Now, Ibrahim said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. We still have a mission to complete. We still have duties to fulfill. but we complete them as men who understand that our ultimate purpose is not destruction, but protection. We fight so others don't have to. We're strong so the weak can be safe. And we show mercy whenever our mission allows, because that's what separates us from the very enemies we oppose. The convoy resumed its journey toward the reconnaissance objective, traveling through increasingly hostile territory. The land here showed signs of recent conflict, burned villages, abandoned equipment, and the occasional grave marker where someone had taken the time to bury the dead. It was a sobering reminder that their earlier encounter with the lions, no matter how profound, existed in a larger context of human violence and suffering. They traveled for most of the day, making good time on improved roads. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, they approached a region known to be contested between government forces and various rebel groups. Here, caution was paramount. Lieutenant Kofi, who had taken the lead vehicle, raised his hand to signal a stop. The convoy halted immediately, soldiers tensing and reaching for weapons. Ibrahim moved forward to join his second-in-command. "What is it?" Kofi pointed toward a cluster of scrub brush about 30 meters off the road. "Movement, sir! Could be an animal, but—" Ibrahim raised his binoculars and scanned the area carefully. At first he saw nothing. Then a subtle shift of color against the brown and green landscape caught his eye. Not an animal. A person, and from the uniform fragments visible, an enemy combatant. Wounded, Ibrahim observed. Badly from the looks of it. Probably from yesterday's fighting. "Orders, sir?" Kofi asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. Ibrahim lowered the binoculars, his mind working through the options. Standard military protocol would dictate caution, approach carefully, secure the individual, determine if they posed a threat, then decide whether to render aid or simply report the position for later collection. But Ibrahim found himself thinking of amber eyes and a muddy cub, of gratitude transcending species, of mercy as the highest form of strength. "We approach with caution but with the intention to help," Ibrahim decided. "He's wounded and alone. He poses minimal threat, and even if he did, we're 14 armed soldiers. We can afford to be merciful. Sir, this man might have been at the attack yesterday. He might have killed our brothers." "You're right, he might have," Ibrahim acknowledged. "And that's exactly why showing him mercy matters. Anyone can help a friend. The real test of our humanity is how we treat those who have hurt us." He turned to address the soldiers who had gathered around. "Listen carefully. We're going to render aid to a wounded enemy combatant. I know that goes against every instinct you have right now. You're angry about yesterday. You want revenge, but I'm telling you that revenge is a poison that destroys the vessel that holds it. We're better than that. We're going to be the kind of men who show mercy even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances, but none voiced open opposition. Ibrahim's earlier story about the lions had created an opening in their hearts, a willingness to consider that perhaps their commander's unconventional wisdom had merit. "Adeo, Kamara, come with me. The rest of you, maintain defensive positions but do not fire unless I give explicit orders." Ibrahim approached the wounded man slowly, hands visible and empty of weapons. As they drew closer, the extent of the soldier's injuries became apparent. He had been shot at least twice, once in the leg and once in the shoulder. Blood loss had been significant, and his face was gray with shock and pain. When he saw Ibrahim approaching, fear flooded his eyes, and he tried unsuccessfully to raise a weapon that lay just beyond his reach. "Easy," Ibrahim said in the regional dialect, his voice calm and reassuring. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help." "Lies," the wounded man gasped. "You'll torture me for information, then kill me." Ibrahim knelt down, still maintaining a respectful distance. "What's your name?" The question seemed to surprise the wounded soldier. "Why do you care?" "Because you're not an enemy to me right now." "You're a wounded human being. So I'll ask again. What's your name?" A long moment passed. Then Boubacar. "My name is Boubacar. Boubacar, I'm Captain Ibrahim Traoré. These are my men. We're going to treat your wounds, give you water, and get you stabilized. Then we'll arrange for you to be transferred to medical care. I give you my word that no harm will come to you while you're under our protection." Boubacar stared at Ibrahim with a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Why? Your men died yesterday. My unit? We were part of that attack. Why would you help me? Ibrahim pulled out his water bottle and held it to Bubachar's cracked lips, letting him drink slowly. Because yesterday I learned something important. I learned that mercy is the greatest weapon we have. I learned that every act of compassion ripples outward in ways we can't predict. And I learned that the divine, whatever you call it, watches how we treat those who are vulnerable and defenseless. As Private Adeo began treating Bubacar's wounds with the convoy's medical supplies, Ibrahim continued talking. Tell me, Bubacar, do you have family? The wounded man nodded weakly. A wife, 2 daughters. In the village of Kuru, 3 days north of here. Then you need to survive to get back to them. Your daughters need their father, and your wife needs her husband. Whatever brought you to this conflict, whatever cause you thought you were fighting for, it matters less than those 3 people who love you and need you. Tears began streaming down Bubacar's dirt-streaked face. I didn't want to fight, he whispered. They came to our village, said we had to join or they would kill our families. I'm not a soldier. I'm a farmer. I just wanted to grow my crops and raise my daughters. But they gave me a gun and said I had to use it. Ibrahim placed a gentle hand on the man's uninjured shoulder. I believe you. And I'm sorry for what's been done to you and your family. War turns farmers into soldiers and fathers into killers. And it's a crime against humanity every time it happens. As Adeo finished bandaging the wounds, Ibrahim stood and addressed his men. This man is now under our protection. We'll transport him to the checkpoint, where he'll receive proper medical care. Anyone who has a problem with that can voice it now. Silence. The soldiers looked at Bubacar with expressions ranging from pity to grudging respect. The initial anger and desire for revenge had been tempered by witnessing their commander's compassion and hearing the wounded man's story. Lieutenant Kofi stepped forward. Sir, how do we know he's telling the truth? How do we know this isn't a trap? Ibrahim nodded, acknowledging the legitimate concern. We don't know for certain. But look at him, Kofi. Really look. Do you see a hardened terrorist? Or do you see what I see? A terrified man who was forced into a nightmare and is now paying the price. Kofi looked at Bubacar for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I see a father who wants to go home. Exactly. And that's who we're helping today. Not an enemy. A father. They carefully moved Bubacar to one of the vehicles, making him as comfortable as possible. As they prepared to continue their journey, something remarkable happened. Bubacar, despite his pain, reached out and grasped Ibrahim's hand. Captain, he said, his voice stronger now. I will remember this. Whatever happens to me, wherever I go, I will tell people about the soldier who showed mercy when he could have shown cruelty. You have given me back my faith in humanity. Ibrahim squeezed the man's hand gently. Don't thank me. Thank whatever force in the universe ensures that mercy is always repaid. And when you get back to your daughters, Bubacar, teach them that kindness is the highest form of courage. Teach them that we're all connected, all part of the same human family, and that violence only perpetuates itself until someone has the strength to choose a different path. As the convoy resumed its journey with its unexpected passenger, Private Adeo moved to sit beside Ibrahim in the lead vehicle. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think the lions were... I don't know how to say this. Do you think they were sent to teach you something? Like specifically to prepare you for moments like this? Ibrahim smiled. I think the universe is constantly teaching us, Adeo. Most of the time, we're too busy or too proud or too angry to learn. But sometimes, rarely, we're open enough to receive the lesson. The lions taught me that mercy transcends everything, species, circumstance, even war. Today, I'm simply applying that lesson. But what if helping that man comes back to haunt us? What if he rejoins his unit and fights against us again? That's possible, Ibrahim admitted. But I'd rather live in a world where I showed mercy and was betrayed than in a world where I became cruel because I was afraid of betrayal. The first makes me human. The second makes me something less. They drove on through the afternoon, the sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds as it approached the horizon. In the back of the convoy, Bubacar drifted in and out of consciousness, his wounds stabilized, but his condition still serious. He would survive, the medic had determined, but he needed proper hospital care soon. As the landscape rolled past, Ibrahim found himself thinking again about the lioness and her cub. How desperate she must have been, how her maternal instinct had overridden her natural wariness of humans, and how, in her moment of greatest need, she had trusted, truly trusted, that the strange two-legged creature approaching her cub meant help, not harm. That trust, Ibrahim realized, was the foundation of everything. Without trust, mercy was impossible. Without mercy, humanity was lost. And without humanity, what was the point of any of this? The fighting, the dying, the endless cycle of violence and revenge. "Sir?" Lieutenant Kofi's voice crackled over the radio, breaking into Ibrahim's reverie. "We're approaching the checkpoint. ETA 15 minutes. Acknowledged," Ibrahim responded. "Make sure medical personnel are ready to receive our passenger." "And Kofi?" "Yes, sir?" "Thank you for trusting me today." "I know this hasn't been a conventional mission." There was a pause. Then Kofi's voice came back, warm with respect. "Sir, I've followed you for 3 years. I've never seen you make a decision that I regretted trusting. Today was no exception. The checkpoint garrison was surprised to receive a wounded enemy combatant being treated with the same care and respect as one of their own. News of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's unconventional act of mercy spread quickly through the military communication network, generating responses ranging from admiration to criticism. That evening, after Boubacar had been transferred to proper medical facilities and the reconnaissance mission had been completed, Ibrahim sat outside his tent under a sky absolutely brilliant with stars. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens like a river of light, reminding him of how small human conflicts were against the vast backdrop of the cosmos. Private Adeo approached hesitantly. "Sir, may I join you?" "Please." Ibrahim gestured to the ground beside him. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both gazing up at the infinite display above them. Finally, Adeo spoke. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened these past 2 days, sir. The lions, the attack we survived, finding Boubacar, all of it. And I keep coming back to one question. Do you think there's a purpose to it all? Like, a reason why these specific things happen to us in this specific order?" Ibrahim considered the question seriously. "I think purpose exists, Adeo, but maybe not in the way we usually think about it. We want clear, simple answers. This happened so that thing could happen, like dominoes falling in a predetermined pattern. But I think it's more complex than that. I think purpose is something we create through our responses to events, not something predetermined. I'm not sure I understand. Sir, let me put it this way. The lions didn't get into that pit so that I could save them and thereby survive the attack on the base. That would make the cub's suffering a tool for my benefit, which is a cruel theology. Instead, I think the cub fell in the pit, a random accident, the kind that happens in nature all the time. But when that happened, I was presented with a choice, stop and help, or drive on with the mission. I chose mercy, and that choice positioned me to survive the attack. The purpose wasn't written beforehand. It was created by my decision in the moment. Adeo thought about this. So you're saying we create purpose through our choices? Exactly. Every act of kindness creates purpose. Every moment of courage, every instance of mercy, every time we choose humanity over convenience, these create meaning in a universe that otherwise might have none. The lions taught me that. Boubacar confirmed it. And you, by being open enough to see the lesson, are carrying it forward. What do you think will happen to Boubacar? Ibrahim sighed. I don't know. Maybe he'll recover and go home to his daughters. Maybe he'll be imprisoned or sent back to fight. But whatever happens, he'll remember that in his darkest moment, an enemy showed him compassion. And maybe, just maybe, he'll pass that forward. Maybe someday he'll be in a position to show mercy to someone else. And he'll remember today and make the compassionate choice. That's how mercy works, not through grand gestures, but through small ripples that spread outward in ways we never see. Do you think we'll ever see the lions again? Ibrahim smiled. I hope so, but even if we don't, they're with me always now. Up here, he tapped his temple. And here, he placed his hand over his heart. They taught me the most important lesson a soldier, a human being, can learn. That strength without compassion is brutality. And courage without mercy is just violence wearing a uniform. As if summoned by his words, a sound drifted through the night, distant but unmistakable. A lion's roar, rising and falling across the darkness. Both men turned toward the sound, straining to hear. It came again, closer this time, followed by another roar in response. A conversation in a language older than humans, a song of the wild that had been sung for millennia. "That could be them," Hideo whispered. "Maybe," Ibrahim agreed. "Or maybe it's just the world reminding us that we share this planet with countless other beings, each with their own struggles and triumphs, their own capacity for suffering and joy. Either way, it's a beautiful sound, isn't it?" They sat listening until the roars faded into the distance, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the occasional call of a night bird. The stars continued their slow wheel across the sky, indifferent to human concerns, yet somehow beautiful in that indifference. "Sir," Hideo said eventually, "I want you to know that what happened these past 2 days has changed me. I joined the military because I wanted to be strong, to protect my country, but I thought strength meant being hard, unyielding. Now I'm starting to think that real strength might be something different, something softer, but more durable." Ibrahim turned to look at the young soldier, seeing himself reflected there. The idealism, the desire to make meaning from chaos, the gradual awakening to deeper truths. "You're learning what took me 20 years to understand, Hideo. Hardness is brittle. It breaks under enough pressure. But flexibility, compassion, the willingness to bend, that's what endures. Water is soft, but given enough time, it carves through solid rock." "Will you tell your family about the lions when you get home?" "Absolutely. My daughter Amina especially will love that story. But more importantly, I'll try to show them every day what those lions taught me. I'll be more patient with Amina when she makes mistakes. I'll listen more carefully to my wife when she expresses concerns. I'll try to see the humanity in everyone I meet, especially, those I disagree with." "That sounds like a good way to live, sir?" "It's the only way to live, Hideo. Everything else is just survival. And we're meant for more than mere survival. We're meant to create meaning, spread compassion, and leave the world a little softer than we found it." As the night deepened and other soldiers began emerging from their tents to join them, Ibrahim found himself at the center of an impromptu gathering. Men who had served under him for years, along with new recruits barely old enough to grow beards, all came to sit in a loose circle under the stars. No one spoke at first. They simply sat together, finding comfort in community after days of violence and loss. Finally, Lieutenant Kofi broke the silence. "Sir, some of the men have questions about what happened. With your permission, I'd like to facilitate a discussion." Ibrahim nodded. "Of course. This is important." One of the older soldiers, Sergeant Diarra, spoke up. "Captain, with all respect, I don't understand what we're doing anymore. We came out here to fight enemies, to complete missions, to serve our country. But now we're stopping for animals and helping wounded rebels. I'm not criticizing, sir. I'm genuinely trying to understand what's changed." It was a fair question, and Ibrahim appreciated the sergeant's honesty. "What's changed, Diarra, is my understanding of what it means to serve. I used to think our job was to destroy threats, to be harder, faster, and more lethal than our enemies. And there's truth in that. Sometimes we do need to fight. But I've come to realize that our highest calling isn't destruction. It's protection. And you can't truly protect life if you've lost the ability to recognize its value in all forms." Another soldier chimed in. "But sir, the enemy doesn't show mercy. They killed 23 of our brothers without hesitation. How do we fight that without becoming just as hard? That's the challenge, isn't it?" Ibrahim acknowledged. "And I won't lie to you, it's not easy. But consider this. If we become as cruel as our enemies in order to defeat them, what have we actually won? We may win battles, but we lose ourselves in the process. I'd rather be a man who sometimes fails because he tried to show mercy than a man who always succeeds through cruelty." Private Hideo spoke up. "The captain saved a lion cub, and in doing so, saved all of us from the attack. Doesn't that prove that mercy works?" "Maybe," Ibrahim said carefully. "Or maybe it was coincidence. I don't know for certain, and I never will. But here's what I do know. Even if saving that cub hadn't saved our lives, it would still have been the right thing to do. We don't show mercy because we expect rewards. We show it because it's who we want to be. Any benefit that comes from it is grace, not payment." Sergeant Diarra nodded slowly. "I think I'm beginning to understand, sir. You're saying that mercy isn't a tactic. It's a principle. Exactly. And principles aren't things we adopt when they're convenient. They're who we are, tested especially when following them is difficult or costly. The conversation continued late into the night, with various soldiers sharing their own thoughts and experiences. Some spoke of times they had witnessed cruelty and how it had haunted them. Others talked about moments when they had received unexpected kindness and how it had changed them. Through it all, Ibrahim listened more than he spoke, recognizing that his men were processing profound questions that had no easy answers. As the gathering finally began to disperse near midnight, Lieutenant Kofi lingered behind. "Sir, I think what you did these past 2 days, with the lions and with Boubacar, will be talked about for years. You've given the men something to think about beyond simple survival. You've given them a philosophy." Ibrahim shook his head. "I haven't given them anything, Kofi. I've just shared what was given to me by a desperate lioness and her trapped cub. I'm merely passing forward the lesson. That's all any of us can do. Learn from our experiences and share those lessons with others. Still, sir, you could have kept silent about all this. You could have saved the cub and moved on without making it into some larger teaching moment. Why didn't you?" Ibrahim was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Because I think we're living in a time when people have forgotten how to be human. We're so busy being hard, being strong, being victorious, that we've forgotten the most basic truth. We're all connected. Every human, every animal, every living thing is part of the same web of existence. When we tear at that web through cruelty or indifference, we damage ourselves. But when we repair it through mercy and compassion, we heal not just others, but ourselves as well." "That's beautiful, sir. Almost poetic." "The truth usually is, Kofi. We just get so caught up in complex philosophies and ideologies that we forget the simple truths we learned as children. Be kind. Help when you can, and remember that every living thing wants basically the same things you do: safety, love, and a chance to live without suffering." As Ibrahim finally retired to his tent, he pulled out the stone he had taken from beside the lion's pit. In the dim light of his small lamp, it looked ordinary, just a piece of weathered rock, shaped by millions of years of wind and water. But to Ibrahim it was a talisman, a physical reminder of the day his life had changed direction. He held it up to the light, turning it slowly, studying the minute patterns and colors in its surface. "Thank you," he whispered to the stone, to the lions, to whatever force in the universe had orchestrated those miraculous days. "Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the reminder. Thank you for the grace." Then Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier who had learned compassion from lions, lay down to sleep with the stone clutched in his hand and the sounds of the African night singing their ancient lullaby beyond the tent walls. 6 months later, the story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré and the lions had become legend. It spread through the military ranks, passed from soldier to soldier in the quiet moments between operations. It was told around campfires and in mess halls, shared over radios during long nights of guard duty. And with each telling, something remarkable happened. Men who had grown hard from years of conflict began to soften. Soldiers who had seen too much death began to rediscover their capacity for mercy. The story reached beyond the military as well. Journalists heard whispers of it and sought confirmation. Human rights workers took note. Eventually, it was featured in an international documentary about compassion in conflict zones, and Ibrahim found himself somewhat embarrassed by the attention. "I'm not a hero," he insisted in interview after interview. "I just did what anyone with a heart would do." The real heroes are the lions, who trusted a human in their darkest moment. But others saw it differently. They saw in Ibrahim's story a parable for their own times, proof that even in our darkest moments, even in the midst of violence and hatred, the capacity for compassion still exists, that we can choose mercy over cruelty, connection over division, humanity over tribalism. Boubacar, the wounded enemy combatant Ibrahim had saved, did eventually return home to his family. True to his word, he told everyone who would listen about the captain who had shown him mercy. Some of his former compatriots dismissed the story as propaganda or lies, but others heard it and felt something shift inside them, a crack in the armor of hatred. letting in a sliver of light. Years later, when a young rebel was captured by Boubacar's village militia, it was Boubacar who stepped forward and demanded the youth be treated humanely. "A soldier once showed me mercy when he could have shown cruelty," Boubacar explained. "He taught me that we have a choice in every moment, to perpetuate the cycle of violence or to break it. Today I choose to break it." As for the lions, Ibrahim never saw them again in person, but he thought of them often, especially during difficult moments when he was tempted to respond to hatred with hatred, to cruelty with cruelty. In those moments, he would reach into his pocket and feel the stone, and remember the eyes of a mother lion filled with trust and gratitude. He told the story to his daughter Amina, who grew up with it as part of her personal mythology. When she was old enough, he took her to the place where it had happened, and together they sat where he had sat 6 years earlier, hoping to catch a glimpse of the lion family. They didn't see the lions that day, but as they were leaving, Amina pointed to a spot in the tall grass. "Papa, look." Ibrahim turned and saw 3 lions in the distance, too far away to identify clearly, but the right size and composition: a lioness, a male, and a young adult offspring. They sat watching the humans watching them, and for just a moment, Ibrahim felt a connection across the distance. A recognition. A remembrance. Was that them? Amina whispered, barely breathing. "Maybe," Ibrahim said softly. "Or maybe it's the universe reminding us that the lesson continues, that somewhere right now someone is facing their own lion pit, their own choice between mercy and indifference. And maybe, just maybe, our story will help them choose compassion." They stood together, father and daughter, watching until the lions rose and moved away into the grasslands. 3 golden forms gradually merging with the golden grass until they couldn't be distinguished from the landscape itself. "Papa," Amina said as they walked back to their vehicle, "do you think the lions remember you?" Ibrahim smiled. "I hope so, sweetheart. But more importantly, I remember them. And because I remember, because I learned the lesson they taught, I can pass it forward to you. And someday, you'll pass it forward to your children. That's how mercy works, not through grand gestures, but through small acts of compassion rippling forward through generations. I'll remember, Papa. I promise. I know you will. Amina, you already understand what took me 40 years to learn? That the measure of our humanity isn't found in our strength or our victories. It's found in how we treat the vulnerable, the suffering, the desperate, whether they're human or animal, friend or enemy. In those moments, we discover who we truly are." As they drove away from that sacred place, Ibrahim looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The grassland stretched empty and golden in the afternoon sun, holding its secrets close. But somewhere out there, he knew, lions walked and hunted and raised their young, and somewhere in that vast ecosystem of life and death, of suffering and joy, of cruelty and compassion, the lesson continued to spread, whispered on the wind, carried in the songs of birds, passed from generation to generation in the timeless language of mercy. When lions weep, the story teaches us the universe listens. And when humans respond with compassion, the universe answers. Not always in ways we can predict or understand, but always in ways that remind us of a fundamental truth. We are all connected, all part of the same miraculous, terrible, beautiful dance of existence. And our greatest power, greater than any weapon, more enduring than any empire, is the simple choice to be kind. The end.